of their online events. This is a summary of what happened yesterday in our ACTCA Monday Night Blitz tournament, which is held in leechess.org on the ACTCA Fast Chess Club. Local Canberra players who can't play face-to-face at the moment because we're in lockdown. My name's Sean Press. I run these events on behalf of the ACT Chess Association. So last night was our Blitz event. It was run with a time limit of 3 minutes plus 2 second, 3 minutes plus 2 second increment over 9 rounds. In the end, the winner, somewhat surprisingly, was Harry Press on countback over Fred Litchfield. Both scored 7 out of 9. Now, these fast events aren't necessarily serious events, as was shown definitely last night, where the winner in one game started off after e4, c5, marched his king to e3, played king e2, king e3, and then lost quite quickly against Fred. And then in the following game, just to show that whatever goes, he played e6 on his first move, then queen e7, king d8, queen e8. Now I'm wondering whether king e7 on the second move was the more exact move order, and then play queen e8. Anyway, the game, excuse me, the game I've chosen, or has been chosen for me actually, came from last night's event. But I did ask the people playing in the event which games of their own they would like to see featured in the summary. Almost all of them said, no, please don't feature my games. They're too embarrassing. But one brave person stepped up, Connor Amor, and was quite proud of this win, although it's not without its mistakes on both sides. But nonetheless, I'm happy to show this game because it also demonstrates at the lower levels of chess where how often the game is played, and it's slightly different from what is played at the higher level. So we'll start with e4 and c5. Sicilian defense, knight f3, knight c6, d4. These are all good theory moves in the Sicilian, and after taking and taking, that's fine. And black has a number of choices here. We could try and punt the knight with e5, and after knight b5, d6, c4. And even though the white knight has moved 3 times and will move a 4th once a6 hits the board, in return, white has got a nice control over the d5 square. But such things aren't that important early on in your chess career. Knight f6 is the other way of playing. Knight c3, and then after e5 again, which keeps being played in positions like this. We have a similar setup, except this is Sveshnikov. And in this case, white can't play c4 because the knight's already been brought out to c3, which is the reason why black will play knight f6 in this position here. Instead, black took on d4. Now, queen takes. Now, normally, of course, it's don't bring your queen out too early in chess, but of course, you've got no choice here, otherwise you're just going to leave black a piece up. But the reason we don't bring the queen out too early is because it gets chased around the board by your opponent's smaller pieces. Most notably in situations where the queen captures on d4 or d5, for example, in the Scandinavian defense, it's the knight going to c6 or c3 that does the chasing. But black has willingly swapped this one off already, so the queen actually is quite safe on this position, on this square. And in fact, white now has a slight edge already. So a few more moves get played. e6, we bring out our knight. Knight to e7. Now, again, that looks like it gets in the road, but knight f6, which is the natural move, just blunders into e5 because that knight now has no squares, sensible squares, to go to and can easily get trapped on the wrong part of the board. For example, I haven't listed knight h5 here, but g4 is a pain, and that knight can't go anywhere. And after e5, the knight has to retreat, and white is a lot better in this position after bishop f4 because the d6 square can never, the d7 pawn can never get past the d6 square because of the combined efforts of the queen and the bishop. We could play knight d5, but this is just a pawn sacrifice without any compensation. Queen takes d5. And white is just up a pawn. Now, interestingly enough, later in the game, white starts giving away pawns for no compensation. So maybe this was the move for black. But instead, the knight went to e7. Okay, and after bishop d3, defensive move, knight goes to c6. And we do have a knight on c6 attacking a queen on d4. It just took a lot longer for black to get that organised. Queen goes back, bishop e7. Now, probably the most sensible move in positions like this, castles, unless you're trying to exploit some defect in your opponent's position. Just castling is fine here. And after castles, queen g3. The defect that you might argue is being exploited is the fact that the g-pawn is unprotected. So you play queen g3, but after castles, h4 is the right move to try and launch an attack down the king side if you want to, but then d5, fighting back in the center. Now, white is slightly better here, but not massively better. Now, around about here, white comes up with a very clear-cut plan, which he really, really wants to work, but sadly will not. But we'll see it in a second. So bishop d2, castles, and queen h3. And the really clear-cut plan is just simply to combine queen and bishop and checkmate on h7. And whether black saw this coming or not, he played h6. Now, instead of queen h3, castles on the queen side is the other option here if you want to keep going with your king side attack. But bishop f6 is fine, and most of it's defended. But let's just have a look here. So h6, and whether it was because the time control was so fast, 3 minutes plus 2 seconds, or whether white decided that this plan was going to work no matter what, it's interesting to see. So he played e5, and the idea, of course, is to look at h7. But with h6, there may involve a bishop sacrifice on h6. But I'm sure that white had just decided that this was what was going to happen. Now, early on in your chess career, this is how lots of people play chess. And there's a good thing about this and there's a bad thing about this. The bad thing about this is you lose lots of games because you don't take into account what's changed in the position. Okay? And you've got to always decide whether your plan still works after your opponent has played a few moves. No good playing a plan that's not going to work because your opponent's already defended against it. The good thing, however, is at least it's a plan. Okay? And sure, on one level, it probably doesn't work as often as you would like, but when it does work, at least you learn something from following this plan. So this is just not a good move. Okay? E5 is a blunder because we just take the pawn. And then I think white realized that they'd lost a pawn. But they played bishop b4, and the idea behind bishop b4 was so the knight doesn't take the bishop, so I can still checkmate on h7. But after d5, where's the bishop going to go? And the bishop goes back to d3. Now, black's best move here is just to take the bishop. And almost certainly there's going to be no mates on the king side because most of the attacking pieces have just come off. And the queen goes to b6 and threatening the weak b2 pawn. Looking at the f2 pawn in case white castles queenside, and also the nice pawn on d5 does a lot of control of important squares on e4 and c4. So the knight on c3, which might naturally head across the board, is unable to do so. Instead, black played bishop g5. Again, the idea is to swap some pieces off, which they did. Bishop takes, queen takes. f4, yeah, now I don't know whether this was just a miscalc or whether white had decided that having given away one pawn, they were just going to give away two. So after knight takes, which is the right order because it's a check, queen takes, queen takes. And it's worth it looking at this position. Black is just ahead 2 pawns. And that's it. Okay. White really can't attack on the king side at the moment because the queen's the only really active piece. The knight on c3 would like to come across. Can't go via e4 because it's blocked by the d pawn. Could go to e2 and then g3. But again, so black is significantly better. The only thing black has to worry about is getting checkmated, which they shouldn't. And then just bring the bishop out from d7 and then the rooks come into the game and black is easily winning. But rook f1 hunts the queen. Queen b4, not a bad idea. You're threatening to take on b2 and again cause some havoc. So white castles. And then d4 with the idea of opening this file for an attack. And in fact, this doesn't throw away the win at all for black, but it does give white at least some chances by bringing the knight across. Probably in positions like this, okay, especially when you're material ahead, you do have the choice between going, hey, can I just start attacking, or B, can I consolidate my material advantage? And in this case, it was probably better to consolidate. Still not so bad. So bishop goes to d7, and now white comes up with a nice unsound sacrifice, which actually won the game, but only because black misdefended. Rook f6, and white was very proud of this, and this is the reason he recommended this game. He said, oh, I've sacked a rook and I won, so it's great. And sure enough, If you're in a losing position like this, and sure, it's very fast chess, you can play moves like this because what's the worst thing that can happen to you? You can't lose the same game twice. You lose it once, doesn't matter. So, and there are no missed wins here. So, because black is just simply winning. But black now has to find the right defensive moves. And black didn't find the right defensive move. And in fact, black found a very quickly losing move. So let's have a look at a couple of defensive ideas here. Tip, don't take the rook. We'll see what happens when you take the rook. So rook a8. Okay, bring one of the pieces in. King goes to b1, bishop c6. And you've got a couple of threats here. One is just to take the knight off the board. So white continues with, well, I'm going to just sack here. I'm going to play rook takes h6. And after g takes, okay, note you can't take the knight now because you just get mated in 1, which is not what you want. Okay, so you take the rook. Knight goes in with a check. King comes up to g7 because, again, if you play king here, you just get mated in 1, which you don't want. Okay. Sometimes at fast chess, moves like this do work simply because opponents will just play the wrong move by reflex, but not in this case. So g takes, knight f6, king goes to g7, of course. Okay. Knight goes to h5, king goes to h7. If you play queen g3 here, just bring the rook over. Okay, and you're protecting all the key squares around the king, and you're also potentially bringing the rook all the way down to this square because the bishop's guarding it, and then b2 might fall in. So instead of moving the queen to g3, knight f6, hoping for a draw maybe if the king goes back to g7. But you've got to be brave. King g6, knight g4, and play h5. Knight goes here, king here, queen takes, and then you just run your king back this way. Now, and there's not a lot of damage that white can do in this position. The king's going to head back to some safe squares, and then again, okay, black is just ahead a piece and easily winning. Oh no, ahead of rook, sorry. Even worse, ahead of rook. Okay, so there's that trick. Bishop c6 you play straight away with the same idea. Rook takes, and again, don't get yourself mated by taking the knight. G takes, knight f6, king h8. And the only difference in this position here, sorry, knight f6. If you play king h8, you do get mated, of course, so we don't want that to happen. The difference in this position here, by the way, it looks identical to the last line, is that in fact, after king g7, which is the right move, knight h5, king h8, knight back to f6, looking for a repetition / mate on h6. Black also has this move now. Queen g5 check, queen c5 check. King moves in the corner, and then you play queen g5, and you're protecting all the squares on your king's side. And you just have that little intermediate check. Now, it's very fast chess. You get to a position like this, sometimes you're going to panic. It's good to have that sort of collection of defensive ideas in your brain. You know, I'm going to check with the queen, and then I'm going to bring my queen over to g5, so that you don't have to work it all out at the board. You go, hang on, I've seen this before, I can play this. Instead, black took. And this is bad. So the queen went here. Instead of knight takes, you take with the queen, and what you've now got is the king in a mating net. And the next move is going to be knight takes f6, and this is going to be checkmate, except for this move here. But even after this move of queen e7, knight takes f6, the only way now to avoid checkmate is to give up your queen. So queen takes, and white is just winning here. And the main reason white is winning isn't the material. Sure, queen is worth slightly more than rook and bishop. It's that the king is trapped on the edge of the board, and the rook on d1 is going to play some sort of zigzaggy, checkmatey type idea like this. Okay, so the king went to h7. Could hang on a little bit longer with e5. And the idea is that the bishop on d7 covers the h3 square, but then the queen check, king over to the edge, play the rook across, and you're looking at rook f6 and h6. You can hold off for a little bit with f6, but after these exchanges, white is just winning in this position. You're threatening to win the e-pawn. You're threatening to win the bishop by checking on f7 or e7. And there's not that much that black can do in this position. King went to h7 instead. Queen check. King back to g8. Queen g5 check. King h8. Okay, king's been driven to the edge of the board now. Then we play rook here. Same idea of just bringing the rook up either to f6 or f4 or f3 or any of the above. So rook g8 was played, which unfortunately walks into a mate in 1. and that's how the game ended. If black decides to try and hang on for a couple of moves, again e5, but after rook f6. Rook check. Now, interestingly enough, when I looked at this game, I thought, yeah, this is an easy mate, but this is just a quick defensive idea for black. Once the king goes there, you can actually play rook here because rook h6 and the rook takes rook. So queen takes e5, pick up another pawn, and then you're completely winning. It doesn't matter what's going on in this position, but white is still winning. So, but the game ended with this little mate here instead. So a win for Connor from, albeit a losing position, but at least he followed a plan. Wasn't always working, but rook f6 was a nice move, even if it didn't work, until his opponent took here. So this is why you practice your tactics, but this is more importantly why, if you want to get better at chess, you just got to play lots of games of chess, so that when these things happen to you, you remember them so they don't happen to you a second time. So thanks for tuning in today's summary of the ACT Monday Night Blitz. My name is Sean Press. I do these little videos at the end of, the start of the next day. Pick a game, have a look at what's good about them, what lessons can be learnt. And just a reminder, tonight there's a rapid play tournament, 10 minutes plus 2 second increment for 6 rounds in Lee Chess. We've got our long time control tournament on Thursday. And the other piece of amazing news is that Street Chess, which normally runs face-to-face but hasn't been running for the month, I'm going to run an online Street Chess this Saturday, again on Lee Chess at the ACTCA Fast Chess Club. And that'll be 11 a.m. on Saturday morning, Canberra time. And that'll go for 7 rounds with 15-minute flat as the time control. So until tomorrow, when I do a summary of our rapid play events, I'm Sean Press, and thank you for watching.